2.5 years later and realised that it was the right decision for me, and at the time could have been the toss of a coin.
And Anstead spent his life building things meant to last: bespoke engines, precision chassis, and a dream of an American family that looked perfect on paper. But at 47, the man who famously chose love over his career is finally revealing the devastating cost of that trade. This isn't just another celebrity divorce. It's about a man who gave up a global legacy for a ghost, only to realize the industry was selling his private heartbreak for profit and reality TV ratings. Let's check it out. The Great British Exit. Imagine standing at the absolute peak of your career, holding the keys to a global television juggernaut, and deciding to just walk away. That is exactly what happened in late 2020 when Anstead stunned the automotive world by announcing his departure from Wheeler Dealers. To understand why this was such a massive gamble, you have to realize that this wasn't just a job for him. He had spent years elbow deep in Greece alongside Mike Brewer, building a reputation as one of the most capable and authentic mechanics on television. The show was a global powerhouse, broadcast in over 200 territories, and Ant was the face of that gritty British craftsmanship that fans absolutely adored. But behind the scenes, a different kind of pressure was building, and it had nothing to do with a seized engine or a blown head gasket. The move to California was supposed to be the beginning of his American dream. According to his official career timeline on Wikipedia, Ant had already started dipping his toes into the US market, but the decision to leave his stable UK legacy was driven by something far more personal than a paycheck. He was trading the cold, oil-stained garages of England for the blindingly white, sun-drenched perfection of Newport Beach. Here is the thing, though. He wasn't just moving for the weather. He was moving because he believed he was building a foundation for a life with Christina Hall. At the time, the world saw them as the ultimate power couple, the perfect blend of British brawn and American glamour. But while the cameras were capturing these staged moments of bliss, the reality was that Ant was surrendering his professional identity to fit into a brand that wasn't his own. Think about the psychological shift that is required for a second. You go from being the lead expert on a show about real mechanical skill to becoming a supporting character in the Christina universe. He was stepping away from a show where the car was the star and entering a world where the star was the only thing that mattered. A report from Motor Trend, a leading voice in the car industry, noted that his exit was a genuine shock to the production because the chemistry was working so well. But Ant was convinced that to be a present father and a devoted husband, he had to leave that world behind. He was essentially liquidating 10 years of hard-earned professional equity to buy a seat at the table of the HGTV elite. But wait, because this is where the story takes a turn that feels almost too cruel to be real. Exactly 1 year after he made this life-altering sacrifice, the very foundation he moved across the world to protect just completely vanished. In September 2020, Christina announced their split on Instagram. And just like that, Ant was left standing in a foreign country with no show, no marriage, and no clear path forward. He had tried to build a life on someone else's foundation, and when that person decided to move on, he was left with the wreckage. It is a terrifying realization when you find out that the brand you tried so hard to protect doesn't actually have a place for you once the storyline changes. Here is what really gets me about this whole situation. Ant is a guy who understands how things work from the inside out. He knows that if you don't secure the bolts, the whole machine eventually falls apart. Yet, he missed the signs that his own life was being held together by nothing more than television lighting and PR strategy. According to an article from Distractify, a publication that tracks digital trends and celebrity movements, Ant's fans were devastated because they felt like he had lost his way. They saw a man who used to take pride in his work, now seemingly lost in the filtered world of influencer culture. It was as if he had traded his soul for a guest spot on a reality show that was already looking for his replacement. Now, if you found yourself in that position, having traded your life's work for a person you loved, only to find out that the person was already halfway out the door, what would you even do? Would you pack your bags and head back to the garage where people actually knew your name? Or would you stay and try to fight for a place in a world that clearly didn't value your craft? Ant chose to stay, but the road back to himself was going to be a lot darker than any of the fans watching at home could have imagined. He was about to learn that, in California, even your grief has a price tag. While he was trying to process the fact that his marriage was over, the machine was already spinning a new narrative. The industry that sold him the dream of the perfect American family was now preparing to sell the story of his heartbreak. The HGTV meat grinder. Ant Anstead was suddenly a man without a country, a job, or a family, sitting in the middle of a California sun trap that had turned into a gilded cage. You have to understand that in the world of the HGTV meat grinder, as some insiders call it, there is no such thing as a private tragedy because every tear is a potential uptick in viewership. While he was trying to figure out how he ended up careerless and single in a foreign land, the industry was already moving on to the next act. It is honestly bizarre to watch when you look at the timeline. According to a deep dive by People magazine, Christina Hall was already moving toward her next fixer-upper marriage with Josh Hall within months of the split. It was like she was following a script where the lead actor had been swapped out, but the production schedule didn't miss a single beat. But wait, this is where Ant tried to take some control back. Instead of retreating, he bought what he called Temple House, a $3.3 million cottage in Laguna Beach. On the surface, it looked like a beautiful fresh start, a sanctuary where a builder could put himself back together. But if you look at the listing details on Realtor.com, you realize that even this sanctuary was built on a shaky foundation. He spent a fortune trying to create a home that reflected his new identity, but in the Newport Beach economy, even a sanctuary is just a high-stakes investment. He was essentially staring at the walls of a house he couldn't actually afford to keep long-term, surrounded by the ghosts of a family life that had vanished before the paint was even dry. Here is the thing about reality TV fame. It doesn't allow for a messy, slow recovery. You either move on fast, or you become a footnote. Ant chose a middle path that was actually quite brave, but also deeply strange to watch from the outside. He checked himself into a 5-week breakup recovery program. According to a report by the Daily Mail, a British publication that follows his every move, Ant was absolutely devastated, admitting that the split hit him like a physical blow. He wasn't just doing this for the cameras. He was a man who had sacrificed his entire career in England and was now literally fighting to survive a public drowning. He was trying to heal in a world that only values people who are camera-ready. And he was realizing that in the flip or flop economy, human beings are treated just like the houses they renovate. They are assets to be flipped, staged, and sold to the highest bidder. Think about that for a second. While he was sitting in therapy sessions trying to find his soul, his ex-wife was already being photographed with a new husband, effectively rebranding the dream life he thought they were building together. It was a masterclass in modern celebrity survival. Christina knew how to keep the machine running, but Ant was still stuck in the grease and gears mindset of a mechanic. He thought things were meant to be repaired. He didn't realize that in Hollywood, when something breaks, you don't fix it. You just bought a newer model and changed the signage on the front lawn. Now, you have to ask yourself something. Is it even possible to truly heal when the whole world is watching you through a filtered lens? Every move Ant made was being analyzed by millions of people who didn't know him but felt entitled to his grief. He was living a life that was half man, half brand, and the stress of that duality was starting to show. He was trying to be the builder who could fix anything, but he couldn't fix the fact that his private life had become public property. But as the dust finally started to settle on Temple House, a much darker battle was brewing beneath the surface, and it was going to be the moment that would finally break the silence. The war for Hudson. Here is the thing about the Hollywood machine. It's hungry, and once it finishes devouring your career and your marriage, it starts looking for the next available asset. For Ant Anstead, that asset was his 3-year-old son, Hudson. Now, this is where the story shifts from a messy divorce into something much more significant. A high-stakes deep dive into the ethics of what people are calling kidfluencing. You see, by 2022, the physical houses were gone, and the television contracts had been shredded, but a new battle was brewing over who exactly owned the digital image of a toddler. Ant decided to do something almost unheard of in the reality TV world. He drew a line in the sand and told the industry that his son was not for sale. It gets intense when you look at the legal filings because Ant wasn't just asking for more weekends or holiday time. According to a report by The Sun, a publication that tracked the 2022 custody battle closely, Ant's primary concern was that Hudson was being used as a prop in paid social media advertisements. He was watching his son being filmed for sponsored content and brand partnerships, basically turning the boy's childhood into a revenue stream for his ex-wife's lifestyle brand. Ant argued in court that this was exploitation, plain and simple. He wasn't looking for a payout. He was fighting for his son's right to a private life that wasn't dictated by engagement metrics or follower counts. Think about that for a second. In the Newport Beach influencer economy, a child's privacy is often the first thing sold to maintain the image of the perfect life. It's the uncomfortable truth behind those polished Instagram feeds. For Christina, this was just how the business worked, and she even reflected later in an interview with ET Online that the battle felt unnecessary and bad for her mental health. But for Ant, the builder who values the integrity of the frame, this was a structural failure he couldn't ignore. He was a father willing to risk a massive public PR nightmare to protect a digital footprint his son was too young to even understand yet. There is a moment in a 2022 video interview where you can see the toll this took on him. Ant doesn't sound like a celebrity reading a script. He sounds like a man who is absolutely exhausted by the artificiality of it all. He spoke about wanting Hudson to have a normal upbringing, one where every organic moment isn't staged for a camera crew or a brand deal. And get this, while the court was deliberating, the public was split. Half the internet saw him as a protective father, while the other half, the side that buys into the HGTV dream, saw him as an aggressor trying to destroy a woman's livelihood. It was a fascinating and, honestly, pretty heartbreaking. Look at how we've started to value content over actual human boundaries. It makes you wonder, though, where exactly the line should be. Should there be a law preventing reality stars from using their children in paid advertisements? Every legend has a hero, and in this specific chapter of his life, Ant was trying to be exactly that for Hudson, even if it meant becoming the villain in the eyes of the mainstream media. He was fighting a war against an entire industry that treats people like parts in a machine, and for a moment, it actually looked like he might win some of that privacy back. Eventually, the legal dust settled, and a judge moved them toward joint custody with specific rules about how the child could be used on screen. Ant had successfully won a measure of peace for his son. But as the calendar turned toward 2026, the builder was about to realize that his own professional life wasn't out of the woods yet. He had protected his family, but his next big business venture was about to hit a wall that would nearly destroy everything he had left. The 2026 reckoning. Ant Anstead finally fought his way back to a garage, far away from the staged reveals of reality television. But he was about to find out that the mechanical world has a much more brutal way of breaking your heart than any Hollywood producer ever could. He poured his soul into reviving Radford Motors, a legendary British coach-building brand, alongside Formula One champion Jenson Button. It was supposed to be his redemption, a return to the real craftsmanship that defined his early years. But by late 2024 and heading into 2026, the wheels didn't just come off. The entire machine basically imploded under the weight of financial chaos and legal warfare. Here is the thing about high-end automotive dreams. They require an astronomical amount of cash and perfect management, and according to Auto Week, a publication that tracks the industry's messy underbelly, Radford hit a wall of Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Now, this wasn't just a quiet corporate filing. It was messy. We are talking about allegations of mismanagement and lawsuits from disgruntled investors who claimed the dream was built on shaky ground. For a man like Ant, who prides himself on being the builder who understands the frame, having his professional reputation dragged through a bankruptcy court was a devastating blow. It felt like no matter how hard he tried to build something authentic, the business side of the world just kept dismantling it for parts. Think about that for a second. He had already lost his career in the UK and his family in California, and now the one thing he used as an anchor, his identity as a car builder, was under fire from people calling him a failed businessman. But wait, because while his professional life was a literal car crash, his personal life was doing something entirely different. He was quietly building a sanctuary with Renee Zellweger. Now, if you know anything about Renee, you know she is the absolute polar opposite of the loud influencer culture Ant escaped. She is a woman who won 2 Oscars, but famously disappears from the public eye for years at a time. According to a timeline compiled by Elle magazine, their relationship didn't start with a press release or a staged photo shoot. It started on a TV set for his show Celebrity IOU Joyride, and stayed hidden for as long as they could manage it. This shift tells you everything you need to know about the 2026 reckoning for Ant. He chose a silent life with a woman who values privacy over a loud life with a woman whose brand depends on the opposite. He was trading the bright lights of HGTV for a life where the cameras are strictly forbidden. And honestly, it's a fascinating contrast. In his previous marriage, every renovation was a content opportunity. With Renee, they are just 2 people living in a house that isn't meant to be a filming location. It's as if he finally realized that you have to lose everything you thought you wanted, the fame, the TV shows, the power couple status, just to find the one thing you actually need, which is peace. Now, here is where it gets interesting. Even with the Radford bankruptcy hanging over his head, Ant hasn't stopped working. He's still in the shop, still getting his hands dirty, and still trying to build things that matter to him. He's just doing it in the dark now. He stopped trying to prove his worth to a television audience that only cares about the next reveal.
Well, if I'm at 6 and you're at 8, let's go bang in the middle now. 7 grand.
You got a deal.
Yeah.
Yeah, go on.
Yes.
According to industry experts quoted in The Drive, a digital hub for car culture, the collapse of Radford was a systemic failure of the market, not necessarily a failure of Ant's skill as a builder. He's still the guy who can strip a car to its chassis and put it back together, but he's finally learned that you can't build a life out of television ratings. Think about your own life for a second. Every legend has a hero, and sometimes that hero is the person who is brave enough to fail publicly and then walk away into the quiet. We see Ant building again, but this time he's doing it for an audience of 1. Do you think he's finally found the right balance between his passion and his privacy? Or is the pull of the spotlight something that a man like him can never truly escape? He's 47 now, and the silence he's kept for the last few years has been more revealing than any interview he ever gave on a red carpet. He's finally revealing the cost of that trade he made back in 2020. He paid for his American dream with his UK legacy, his marriage, and his business reputation. But as he stands in his garage today, with the grease on his hands and a woman who loves him for who he is rather than his follower count, he seems to have finally found a foundation that isn't going to shift. The machine is finally quiet, and for the first time in a long time, the builder is actually at rest. Ant Anstead's story is a warning about letting cameras into our sacred spaces. He built a masterpiece, watched it get demolished for clicks, and had to rebuild. Is the influencer lifestyle incompatible with a real family? Let's discuss below.